dignitaries in CIL. Welcome Professor Shivatani, Professor Pradisi, and Gitanjali Madam from Assam. Sorry, we are slightly haphazard situation. It's a big local festival here today and Saturday. Due to these reasons, participants is less, but they are going to come after the ritual probably. So I welcome Professor Shibatani on behalf of CIL and Director CIL, Professor Rajeshi and Gitanjali Madam. I also would like to request Professor Umarani to come to the dais. Yeah, please, madam. Yeah. So, I request Gami to come with a flower bouquet to give it to Professor Shibatani. We request Akanksha to come with the flower bouquet and the shawl, and request director sir to welcome Professor Pradeshi. Now I request Baite to come and hand over the flower bouquet to Gitanjali Madam. Now I request Dr. Vidyarthi to come up and hand over the bouquet to Professor Umarani and request director sir to now I request Sandeep to come up with the flower bouquet, and I request Professor Umarani to hand over to our director sir. So, sincere apologies for this delay, Professor Shivatani and others. Now I would like to request our Professor Director Professor Shailendra to give the welcome address. Sir, hand over to you.
Good morning, Namaskar. Ellarigu Namaskara. On behalf of Institute of Indian Languages, Bharati Bhasha Sansthan, Mysore, I welcome one of our teachers, Professor Mahasi Shivatani, for this international workshop of nominalization, gender and classifiers, which are collaboratively organized with Ninja in Japan. I also welcome our colleague Professor Prashant Pardesi from Zinjal and Gitanjali Bej for conducting this one-day workshop on this nominalization part. So it's an honor and privilege to welcome one of our teachers, Professor Sivatani sir, whose work as a student I have read a number of times, and who has been working on this typological frame. Earlier, he's one of the important works of causative constructions, has been so prominent among the typological literature. Now, I think this workshop on nominalization, earlier also I listened to him on noun modification at Deccan College. Now on this nominalization process, we may get an insight how to work the quest for understanding the language differences and the language universals. Professor Sivatani's this workshop and his lecture will provide us some insights that how to understand the language structures in Indian situations, especially on genders as well as on classifiers. Even Professor Prashant Pardesi's work on genders and in Marathi, and Gitanjali-based work on nominalization perspective on some northeastern languages will provide us a better understanding on researching the quest for language universals and language particular. And again, I also thank Professor Umarani Papuswamy for making this collaborative workshop, that is a one-day one, for working on these aspects of functional typology and nominalization. So welcome, sir. Welcome our teacher, Professor Sivatani, sir, and Professor Prashant Pardesi, Professor Gitanjali Bej, and Professor Umar Amit for conducting this one-day workshop on this topic. Thank you. And Sujay, and of course, Sujay for co-coordinating this conference. And I'll request Professor Sivatani, Professor Prasant, Professor Gitanjali Bej, and Umarani to light up the lamp. Yes. This is events. Enlightenment.
We all need that. Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
So we can start with the presentation. Yeah. Oh,
So, thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Prashant sir for the introduction about this program. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everybody. I cannot speak Kannada. I wanted to remember a sentence, how to say namaskara. Namaskara. Okay, namaskara. I'm a native speaker of Marathi, so you hear me in the afternoon after the lunch. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Shailendra Mohan and Professor Umarani Opuswamy and her colleagues and their colleagues for making this one-day international workshop a reality. It has been a hard work for both of us to get this workshop together. And I'm glad that we could make it despite so many problems that we had yesterday with our flights. And Professor Shailendra Mohan just had come at 5 o'clock in the morning. Uma also has reached just now. So everybody is coming from different parts. And I'm glad that we all made it to this part. So today we are going to have 3 presentations in this workshop. The first presentation lays the foundation of what nominalization means, and especially how it is relevant to our Indian language, or what Indian languages have to offer to the theory of nominalization. And then after that, there will be 2 case studies. One is from Marathi, other is from Ahomia and Bangla that Gitanjali will do. So this is a part of a project that I'm running at the National Institute for Languages and Linguistics in Japan, which is something like a government organization that CII is. CII deals with Indian languages. We deal with the languages in Japan. But we also have a typological section. So we do comparative studies of all the languages in the world, including Japanese. So our project is going to be running for 6 years from 2022. So we are going till 2028. We'll be working on this phenomena. And I'm sure that there would be many of you who would get interested after listening to us and probably work on your own languages and dialects. And we are really looking forward to both-way interaction between the Indian scholars and the scholars from coming from abroad. So with this short introduction, I think we should get started with the workshop because we have limited time. Professor Shivatani has to take his flight. After he finishes, he will leave this workshop and he has to go to the airport in the afternoon half. Gitanjali and I will take over from him. So thank you once again, Professor Mohan, Professor Masami, and your colleagues for making this possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant sir. Now I request our keynote speaker, Professor Shivatani. He is a well-known name in the field of language typology. At present, he is associated with Rice University, Kobe University, and University of Tokyo. So rather than taking time, I request Professor Shivatani to start the keynote address. Thank you, sir.
I don't need that. I don't think. Okay.
No. No, I just need to write something.
That's not. Oh, he left. That's it. Okay. That's why I.
Okay, let's start. Thank you, Professor Mohan, for the warm welcome and very nice ceremony. Actually, this is my second visit to this institute and to this beautiful town of Mysore. We had, when we were planning this workshop, we realized that we had very tight schedule of 1 week. And we were wondering whether we can make it to Mysore, but I insisted that we come back to this beautiful city and this beautiful institute, which is world renowned, as you know. You should be very proud to be part of this highly regarded institute. When I was here 18 years ago, it was the year of 2004, when you had a tsunami in Chennai. If you remember, some of you may not have been born yet. I gave a talk here in a very small room, but we had, many, of course, colleagues attending to my lecture. But today, we have very beautiful setup because I guess thanks to Professor Mohan as the new director of this institute. So we're very happy to receive this warm welcome here. One thing good about the former, one of the former directors who looked after me was that he let me use his car with a chauffeur for the whole day to do sightseeing. So remember that, Professor Mohan, next time we come back with more leisurely schedule. Okay, let's begin then our talk. So this is what I'd like to do today. Oh, by the way, I was given about 2 hours to present this thing. It may not take that long. We'll try to take a break in the middle. I want to make this very formal, as the setting may seem. So please interrupt me and ask me questions, okay, anytime as we go along. Or at the end of my talk, maybe we'll have a few minutes to take up your questions and discussions. Okay, we're here to learn as much as you're here to learn from us. Right? So what I'd like to do is to first review very quickly the notion of nominalization, because there have been lots of misconceptions about this phenomenon, as I'll show you. We will then look at this Ryukyuan language spoken in Japan, which shows very interesting patterns of nominalization, both formal and functional patterns are revealing in many ways that you will see, especially pointing to the importance of nominal-based nominalization that the field has been neglecting. Okay. If you recall, many definitions on nominalization, most of them, if not all, say nominalization derived nominal structures from verbs, okay, or the members of non-nominal categories such as adjectives. But we are proposing that there are nominal-based nominalizations, derivation of nominal structures out of nominal elements such as nouns. Okay, this may be news to you, but we'll see how important nominal-based nominalizations might be. Okay. This language, Amami Ryukyuan, shows interesting alternating marking patterns. Okay, they have several overlapping expressions, and we'd like to know what motivates those patterns. And I want to invoke the notion of the hearer's economy that motivates diversity in form, and the speaker's economy that drives changes toward form uniformity. Okay, so we'll be looking at this historical development in terms of these competing forces that we believe drives language change. We then point out the need to incorporate a diachronic perspective to synchronic language typology or functional typology. If you recall, typology is an effort to catalog and group different types of constructions according to specific features. But this is a synchronic classification of construction types. Okay? we are seeing some limitations, just as all synchronic descriptions have limitations as to knowing why languages are as they are. We want to know historical reason that brought about these structures. So I'm trying to dynamicize, if you like, functional typological approach. Okay? And then I like to show this thing, the usefulness of this approach to understanding a single language and applying this notion to cross-linguistic, synchronic cross-linguistic phenomena or study of nominalization. I'd like to show this important development in terms of gender and classifier marking. Eventually, we'd like to unify gender marking, classifier marking, and nominalization into one coherent understanding or notion, because we see lots of similarities in their form, use, and function. Okay, we've been treating these things as three distinct phenomena: nominalization as one, gender marking another, and classifier marking as a third distinct phenomenon. But we like to unify them. And language data tell us we have to unify them because you see great deal of similarity, okay, among these structures. So let's go over very quickly what we mean by nominalization. Okay, it is a metonymically based grammatical derivation. Okay, that produces structures that denote things and thing-like entities, just like ordinary nouns do. Okay. Ordinary nouns denote, or in discourse, refer to objects, things, okay, including people, animal, inanimate object, and abstract concepts as well. So this is the important point here is that the outputs are the ones that account for this notion of nominalization, not inputs. Inputs that would vary, as you will see. Okay? Not only verbs, but nouns are potential input to this process. Okay? So I'll give you one example of ordinary metonymy. Okay, like drink a glass a day. So of course you are not drinking glass, you are drinking the content. The relationship between the content and the container is what we call metonymy. These things occurring side by side. So by uttering one, you are evoking the other entity that are together. Okay. This is what we mean by metonymic relationship. And so by drinking a glass a day, we are meaning something different from the noun glass, right? Something intimately related to the concept of this vessel that we call glass, such as orange juice, milk, wine, and so on and so forth. Okay. And it is a context that determines exact denotation, intended denotation. Okay, the drinker glass by itself is very vague, if you like, but it is context will help you that we're talking about, say, oranges. Okay, if we are discussing the benefit of vitamin C, for example, and different kind of fruit juice and so forth, and if the doctor said drink a glass a day, maybe he's intending the hearer to know that he means orange juice. Let's look at this suffix "er" that has given lots of linguists to the idea that nominalization operates on verbs, such as run to runner, speak to speaker. Okay. And that's true. Okay. So these are verbal-based nominalizations, and that's correct. And here, again, what is denoted are those things that are metonymically connected to these activities, such as running, speaking, and so on. Right? So what is most intimately connected to the idea of run? An agent, the runner. Right? And that's how metonymic part comes in, right? In understanding these things. But there are other expressions such as villager, Londoner, lifer, and rear ender. What are these? Are these nominalizations? They won't be, right? Because the traditional definition, widely held definition, said that nominalization derive nouns from verbs. But look at the root of these forms. They are all nominal forms. Rear end means something like this, the back of the car. Right? That's a noun too. But we have the same morphology here. Are you going to divide R into two? That's what science should be doing. Scientists should be not dividing phenomenon into two or many. We should be unifying what appear to be separate phenomena into a coherent single system, if we can. That's what science should do. So you shouldn't be positing two R here. Posit just one. Well, you might say the meaning is different. Yes, meaning is different because the input is different. The upper ones have verbs as input. So something that is immediately connected to activities denoted by these verbs would be an agent. That's how you get this agentive interpretation. And that is due to the nature of the roots involved. If the inputs are what are these? Nouns. Okay, we wouldn't expect there to be agents, patients, and so forth associated with that. But still, expression like villager, for example, denote things, or in this case, people, closely associated with the notion of the village. Maybe the raisins. London in the same way. Lifer, this is a prison inmate who is given a life sentence. Okay, it's a state of affairs, and you have here somebody relating to this sentence. Rear end. Rear end is the back of the car. We're talking about the accident, of particular kind of accident relating to the rear end of the car. It's again metonymic. So exactly same sort of metonymic interpretation is done, and morphology tells us this is a coherent single phenomenon. Okay? So we have to look at these things from the perspective of not only the suffix itself, but also from different types of inputs as well, right? And these processes that we're talking about here produce nouns. Okay, not all nominalization expressions are nouns, as we'll see immediately. Okay. So we have to recognize verbal-based lexical nominalizations on the one hand, and nominal-based lexical nominalization. We're calling these as lexical nominalization because they produce words that are stored in your mental lexicon. Okay, you have in your mental lexicon words like runner, speaker, and so forth, and so on, villager, London, and so on. But N-based nominalization is very, very productive, right? Something that the field has been ignoring all these years. So you have new forms like footballer that I didn't hear when I was small. YouTuber, of course, I didn't know. 20 years ago. So this is a new word. Okay. Moreover, Major League Baseball fans. These are all new developments, very productive. Okay. But even if you don't refer to these things like pianist, physicist, physician, these are all nominal-based nominalizations, right? You're deriving pianist, which is a noun, from the noun piano. I don't know why people are saying nominalization is verbal-based. Please go back to your favorite dictionaries of linguistics, and they all tell you nominalization is verbally based. That's entirely false. Another radical departure, if you like, that I have been pursuing to recognize grammatical nominalization of this type, such as who gets there first, define the truths. Who gets there first? Again, this denotes thing, right? Because we're talking about this person who gets there first, who define the truth. A person who is metonymically related to the idea of getting there first. That's the denotation of this expression. So we have a nominal denotation here. This is a nominal structure. The same with would you like. We are denoting an object of your liking. Okay, your liking obviously has something as a target of your liking, right? You cannot like anything. You cannot like without liking something. Right? To like means there is something involved, and this which you like denotes the thing that you like. Again, it's nominal. Now these are grammatical. Okay, so this just summarizes what I just said. But these are not lexical nominalizations. Right? As we are saying, we have to distinguish between lexical nominalization that produce nouns, words. And these are not words. These are grammatical structures. These are phrasal. And that's why I'm calling them syntactic structures, grammatical nominalizations. Okay? But they still denote things, okay, just like nouns. As we said, a person closely associated with the idea of getting there first. Now, what you are taught as relative clauses, okay, are not independent structures from these grammatical nominalizations. You can use these grammatical nominalizations as a modifier of a head noun, okay? And in this expression. And this is what so-called relative clause construction is all about. The relative clause construction makes use of a grammatical nominalization as a modifier. There's no independent construction or, if you like, structure, relative clause apart from grammatical nominalizations. Okay? What you're calling relative clauses are simply a use of grammatical nominalization of this type. There are other types of them. Which you like can also modify. So you can choose a toy which you like. So this is another radical proposal that I've been making the past 10, 15 years. I still haven't been able to convince everybody because they are stubborn. But I can convince those people who haven't had any training in linguistics very easily. They say, "Oh, that's wonderful, and I follow you well." But these guys who have been taught wrong things cannot change their mind. I hope you are not one of those. Okay, we all have to be flexible. How old am I? I'm 78. I'm still trying to be very flexible to learn new things from young people like yourselves. Okay, I hope you remain very flexible. Doubt everything you have learned in the past. Doubt everything you read, right? Never believe, because these are mostly false. As I tried to show you, I already made about 2 or 3 points that point to the incorrect aspects of the traditional linguistic teaching. There's nothing like relative clause. Okay. You are making use of grammatical nominalization as modifier. That's all. Okay. So we call these upper expression, like who gets there first, as an NP use. You're using this who gets there first as the head of a noun phrase, of the noun phrase here. Who get there first is nominalization, grammatical nominalization, functioning as the head of a noun phrase. Same here. Okay. So these nominalizations have 2 major uses. Modification use, when you have a head noun to modify. And an NP use, okay, when these structures function as heads of noun phrases. Okay. And we'll be evoking these notions throughout the talk. Okay, let's go to this island in the Ryukyuan archipelago in southwest of Japan. So the Ryukyuan archipelago is here, and Amami is in the northern part. So the Amami Ryukyuan languages belong to the northern group of the Ryukyuan. Now, Ryukyuan languages traditionally have been recognized as dialects of Japanese for purely political reasons. Okay. There's no linguistic justification for calling them as dialects. Okay. They are not they are not intelligible to speakers among themselves, actually, let alone people from the mainland Japan. And Ryukyu was a kingdom, okay, before the 17th century. So by these 2 accounts, they should be recognized as sister languages of Japanese, okay, rather than dialects of Japanese. So we have 2 language families around Japan, Ryukyuan languages, but these are related. These are related sister languages, if you like. So we now have the term Japonic, okay? Japonic language family consisting of 2 groups, Ryukyuan and so we'll be talking about these expressions from Ryukyuan, Amami Ryukyuan. Let's look at the expressions to mean something like in English you have to say the one standing there. In Middle English you could say who is standing there, which is better for a purpose. But anyway, one standing there. You can either say tachun, standing as a nominal expression, or tachun nu or tachun nun. Okay. So you have this repetition of n, and you add nu and you n to the same. The third one is not entirely grammatical to some people. Some people question, it's hard to say that. So one puzzle is why Amami multiplies these expressions. 3 expressions. You have 3 expressions meaning the same thing, one standing there. And this side, we have wakyan kwa, means our child. The genitive construction, possessive construction. So the first observation we make is that what appears to be nominalizers, that nominalized structure, they are standing, okay? And then you derive nominal out of that, denoting person standing there. Can occur repeatedly. You don't have to repeat these things. You can just end with the first expression. That's okay too. The second observation you might make is what appears to be a nominalizer, N in this case, occurs in the genitive expressions. We like to answer why this is the case. Okay, what's the connection between nominalizations and genitives, possessive construction? Right? Morphology tells us that there is some connection here. Again, this is something you have to capture. If you see some morphological similarity across different constructions, your task is to see some reason behind that similarity. It could be accidental if it only happens in one language. But we see this kind of connection between nominalizations and genitive construction, or possessive construction, if you like, one after another, across different languages. If you look at compare these expressions, the one standing there with the house is ours, for example, or ours is that one. That's also possible in subject position. You see even more striking similarity, morphological similarity. Not only N, but nu form and nun form also occurs in the genitive expressions. So there's very systematic morphological correspondences, if you like, between nominalizations and genitive constructions. Okay. So the first immediate suggestion, it's not very difficult, it doesn't take any intelligence to posit this thing. Namely, maybe what we've been calling genitives are a species of nominalization that are based on nominal forms, such as the child's book, for example, or John's book, or my book, or mine, John's, yours, and your. Okay. So this is what we suggested several years ago, that we have to recognize N-based, nominal-based nominalization, grammatical nominalization. I raised earlier the need for recognizing nominal-based lexical nominalization, right? Like villager, Londoner, and so on and so forth. We need grammatical counterparts similar to that. So the first ones, they are similar in that inputs are verbal. So we have verbal-based nominalization, grammatical ones on the left, on your left, and lexical one on the right. And then we have N-based nominalization, lexical nominalization on the right, and grammatical nominalization on the left. You don't memorize expression like John, okay, this dogs, and bills, okay, while you recognize things like London and village as words. Okay, so John's, bills, mine, these are grammatical nominalization. So the first, what is being denoted by verbal-based nominalizations, things that are metonymically connected to some activities, just as in the case of verbal-based nominalization. So we see the parallelism in the interpretation. What is metonymically connected to the activity of speaking on the one hand, what is metonymically connected to the activity of standing there, namely an agent that is standing. And here we also see the meaning semantic parallelism, if you like. So mine, yours, his, John's, these denote things that are metonymically connected to the base form. Like John's possessions, right? John's. This book is John's. You're not denoting John. You're denoting something that is intimately connected to him. Maybe his possessions. It doesn't have to be possession, right? It could be John's hospital. Any hospital that have some intimate connection with John that he attends, or he could be an architect who designed this hospital. So it's not only position, but also all kinds of things. Like today's weather, today's lecture. Today doesn't own my lecture, but things having to do with today, like your daily schedule, including conferences and that. Okay. So N-based and vowel-based nominalization show formal similarity. That's the first guiding hint that these are unified phenomena. But they also show similarity in usage and function. Yeah? So you can use these as NP heads and denoting a person standing there, okay, in this code. That we call NPUs. And the function associated with that is a referring expression. So that house is ours, or ours is that house. Okay. We are referring to what I possess. So Wakian or mine, John's, this is John's, or John's is that one. John there is the head of the noun phrase. Okay. And again, we are referring. We can be using these as modifiers, as in the case of so-called relative clauses. Right? So we can use one standing there as modifier, as in the case of English, the child standing there. And the function there is to restrict the denotation of the head noun, what? Not any old child that I'm talking about. The child, but the subset of the denotation of child, but the one that I have something to do. Okay, that's what we mean by our child. Okay. And this is what modification use of. Let's see. What can what? This we're talking about. Oh, sorry. The earlier one we're talking about the child, not any child, but the one who is standing. Right? And here, not any old child, but the one we have something to do with. So they both have, and basic grammatical nominalization, vowel-based grammatical nominalization, also show similarity in function that arises from how they are used in grammar. Okay, I'll show you that this kind of phenomenon is fairly widely observed, including Indo-Aryan languages and also Dravidian languages. The first example is from Nepali, where this morpheme ko is used not only for vowel-based nominalization, but also for N-based nominalization. Madhav ko means madhavs. And dieko means like giving. Oh, yeah. What madhav gave me. Here again, morphology tells you that these are a related phenomena, not related phenomena. Of course, if this happens only in one language, as I said, this could be accidental, but actually this sort of pattern occurs all over the world. Genitives are very similar in morphology to what you might call vowel-based nominalizations. So this is Assamese, Gitanjali's language. Now, here, nominalizer are for the vowel-based one. Okay, this is so-called participle form. What you have been calling as participial constructions, participles are vowel-based nominalizations. Okay, they are nominal. And in the case of genitive, so-called genitive, you have R here, as in other Marathi or a few other, maybe many other Indo-Aryan languages. So nominalizers are different, but they share classifier marking property. Now, the fact that you can use classifiers with these expressions, both these expressions, is very important because that indicates that what we have been calling nominalizations are in fact denoting things, okay, that can be classified according to their shape, according to their texture, size, maybe. So even though they differ in nominalizers that they use, they are unified in terms of this phenomenon of classifying marking. So there's again similarity that you need to capture. Okay. If these are two disparate things, why do they take same kind of classifiers? That's what you have to answer. So the problem here, the major problem here is we have been analyzing the first one as participles. Some people think the participle sentences or clauses. That's entirely false. Okay, sentences, clauses make statements. These don't make statements. We are referring to something that you are wearing. Okay. We're not saying you are wearing something. We are referring to an object associated with you are wearing. If we treat this as something different, if you like, as a red clause or as a participle, and if you analyze to mark as genitive construction, positive construction, you're recognizing two separate constructions. But then you have to answer why this can take classifiers. Okay. An immediate answer that might come to your mind is that, oh, they both modify. So there's something common. All genitives can modify, and we saw participles, verbal-based nominalization also modify. But that's not the ultimate answer, right? Then you'd have to be asking if these belong to two different categories, participle on the other one, on the one hand, and genitive on the other hand. Why do they both modify? Why do they share this function of modify or not modifying? You know, as in NPU's construction that we have been looking at. And that's what you have to answer. If these belong to different categories, why do they show morphological as well as functional similarities? Now, these morphological markings that we have been looking at are pointing to the similarity in function. Morphology is there for some good reason. Okay, this is your local language, Canada, right? Here, the nominalizer is shared, and you have this in both verbal-based banda as well as tandea, right? Fathers. This is the same as in Nepali. Nepali was po. And you have in Canada and a few other Dravidian languages. So there's obvious similarity between what you have been calling genitives and what you have been calling participles. And they also share the property of gender marking. Just as classifiers, this construction can take gender marking. Again, indicating that banda and this one, father, tandea, denote things. Okay? That can be classified into either masculine or neuter or feminine person. So they have denotation properties. They're denoting things that can be classified according to the gender classes of the language. There are, however, differences between these things, between N-based nominalization, verbal-based nominalization, and in their usage pattern. Okay. So if you look at these again, N-based nominalizations, if you compare N-based nominalization in NPUs and V-based nominalization in NPU, you see nominal-based nominalizations display a greater diversity in form. Okay. They allow no, and nun, and they have new form, what can do and what can nu. If you look at the verbal counterpart, nu and nun, the green ones are not permitted. That are permitted here. And we said that this fourth one, nun, with verbal form, is a little strange. Some people don't like it, some people accept it. But what can nun here, the upper one, is perfectly well accepted by everybody. So although they are similar, there are some differences between them. The same obtained here and well. So forms in NPUs, okay. If you compare NPUs as well as modification inputs here, you see more diversity here. Okay. You have N, nu, nun, permitted, nu, nun, but these forms are not well established on the right. So N-based nominalizations show greater degree of diversity, more restricted. With the verbal-based one, the same. Nominal form, yeah, NPU's form, these are perfectly fine, okay, for many speakers, but not in the case of modification use. So we see these two, we can make these two observations. So by looking at the form in different functions, forms based on different inputs, we can make these observations. These are generalizations. Okay? N-based nominalization show a more diverse marking pattern than verbal-based nominalizations, and forms in NPUs display a greater diversity than those in modification use. Okay. Perfectly legitimate generalizations. But these kind of descriptions do not tell us why we see this kind of disparity. Why are they not equally complex? Why are they not equally simple? Okay. So I alluded to this fact earlier that synchronic grammars that you're writing may pose a lot of questions for you. Why, my language is like this? And very often you cannot explain these facts in synchronic terms alone. You need some diachronic perspective to explain. We have ended up with India today because of historical development in this country, right? We ended up with Japan today because, or thanks to, historical developments. So in order to understand the present society, you need to look at history, okay, that these countries have undergone. So what I'm suggesting is we must dynamicize functional typology by incorporating a diachronic perspective to explain this disparity between two different usages and differences between nominal-based versus verbal-based nominalizations. What we suggested earlier is that when the spreading of nominalization markers takes place, okay, but not randomly. That is, you have an innovation in this domain. N-based nominalization in NPUs, This is where you make an innovation. You invent a new form here. And this form can be expanded, if you like, to the verbal domain, but first to the NPU's domain. And that can spread to the modification context in this case. So we are offering an explanation like this one. Okay, NPU's forms of N-based nominalization will show greater diversity because of the B development. So the forms in verbal-based nominalization are secondary development, likely to be secondary development out of N-based nominalization. N-based nominalization is a starting point from which verbal-based nominalization may take up some features. We are saying NPU's forms show greater degree of diversity in form because they are the starting points. And modification form in both N-based nominalization and B-based nominalization may lag behind, if you like, in the development, in spread of these markers. And that's why we see greater diversity in NPUs, but less in the modification context. So in other words, we are saying that these forms developed out of the ones on the left in the NPS form. And so in the case of the first example, the spread has completed. It's been transferred to the modification context, if you like, 100%. We see Wakanu not being that stable because the spread had not reached to its end. Some speakers have picked up the spread, some people have not adopted the spread yet. The next one, even less. Now we see these variations because of the rate of spread increase. Some construction, presumably older one here, earlier one has spread to the modification context 100%, newest lagging behind. And in this case, both have been transferred, expanded. So we are saying the form on the NPU's side display more diversity because they are the origins of change. And those changes may spread or may not. Even if they spread, some forms spread faster than the other one. Presumably the older ones spread first and new ones lag behind. And we're saying N-based nominalizations show a greater degree of diversity because they are the origin, they are the starting points of historical change. B-based nominalization pick up those markers from N-based nominalization. And that's why some changes taking more time than some others. So N-based nominalization show a greater degree of diversity than B-based nominalization because of the spread pattern B. The same here. Next question, why? How innovation spreading of nominalization happen? This is what we like to explore. So if you look at the left side form vertically, you see new forms are invented. Okay. So they used to have Wakan, and they started to use Wakan new form, more complex form, and third one, another complex form. And they started new form, nu and nun. So the innovation takes place vertically, if you like. And these innovations spread to the modification context. And that seems to be what's happening here. So our question here then, question would be, why do they innovate this form? Okay. Why aren't you satisfied with what can do? And you have one form. English, after all, has just one form, like mine and my, and they're happy with it. Why do you have to invent new forms? Another question is why these new forms are taken up by the modification forms. These are kind of questions that I would like to answer. So if you look at these things from the following perspective, maybe some answers emerge. So the crucial point that we are looking at is whether forms in NPUs is the same as the one that used in the modification context. Okay, this is a reconstructed form. We don't have this form anymore. But here we have Wakya 2 and the Wakya Ya. Mine and my house are the same. So as if we are talking about mine, in English they are different. But in the case of his, that's the same, right? This is his house. Same. Could be same. Yours is different, ours is different. But then if you innovate a new form at second stage, you have form differentiation between the NPU's form and the modification form. Wakyan versus Wakyan. And then if you spread this n to the right, you have the same form. So same form, different form, same form, different form. And this is what seems to be happening with the alternation. So this is the same. Historically, maybe they had just the same form. They innovated this form. I'm tired of using the same form in two different functions. If I innovated this one, I see the difference in form between the modification form and NPS form. But again, I might want to go back and extend this one to the modification form, and then I achieve uniformity in form. Maybe 30 years after that, I'm getting tired of using the same form. So let's innovate by adding new. Okay? Then I achieve the differentiation, form differentiation between two different functions. Okay? NPU's function would have nun, right? And modification form un. You can repeat this pattern. And this is what we have. Now, they developed a new pattern of differentiation. Okay, Wakya nu, do versus Wakya ya. Okay, the different form. By spreading this new form to the modification context, I achieve form similarity. And innovate new one like this one. But if you expanded it to the modification context, you achieve similarity. So this is what seems to be happening. So the crux of the problem here is that formal identity variation across two different functional domains, NPU's domain and modification domain. At some stage in the language development, these forms are the same. At another time, they are different. If they are different, there's some inertia to bring it back to the state where you have the same form. So what we need is some understanding why this kind of alternating patterns obtains in this language. and as you see similar pattern in a smaller scale, okay, in languages around you. In understanding this alternative pattern, I like to get some hint from the pioneer functionalists. Hermann Paul, German neo-grammarian linguist, and more modern Andre Martinet, who is a functionalist in modern time. Let's look at Martinet's description here. He's essentially saying language change is driven by two competing factors or forces, if you like. One is the need to be understood. You have to pay attention to the hearer so that you would be able to understand your intention. The other is for the speaker to conserve his energy, both mental as well as physical. I guess if you've done the phonology, you know a lot about the speaker's economy, because many phonological rules are motivated by the speaker's economy. So here, the first part, we're talking about the hearer's economy. Okay? You make forms playing different functions different, so that the hearer would know if what function you are using the expression in question. If you use the same form, the hearer has to figure out. Okay, he had no clue. You have to look at the context. You have to look at the construction carefully. It's more taxing on the part of the speaker. But if you flag and say, okay, I'm using this form in a referring function, I'm using this form in the modification function, then the hearer would have easier time to process. And what Martinet is talking about here is the speaker can conserve your energy. In a very succinct way, Paul is saying the same thing. You only need to have so much to be understood. Okay. That's speaker economy. But you have to be able to, or you have to make the hearer understand what you are saying. Yeah, he's talking about the hearer's economy. So I'm saying the forces that drive the change have the two different considerations, okay, that are opposite in force. They are competing motivations as well. So what we have is this one, right? The speaker's economy aims to simplify, okay, to make identical forms for representing the conceptual category involved. If there's only a single conceptual category involved, they want to use the same form for different manifestations of this conceptual structure, conceptual domain. Okay. So here we're talking about nominalizations, okay, which may be nominal based or verbal based, which may be used in nominal, what function is that? NP function, using them as an NP or as modifier. So they differ in their manifestations, in their use. But the underlying concept, unifying concept, is nominalization. And therefore, the speaker's economy wants you to have a single marking of this phenomenon, so that it is easier for me to store or to process these things. To produce nominalization, I only have to remember one morphological element if I have one form. But if I have 5 different morphemes, representing n-based nominalization in NPUs, and the same thing in the other one, modification function. I have to remember these two different forms, right? But having diversity in form helps the hierarchy to retrieve the function that is different constructions. And so at the top situation, we are favoring the speaker. But then the pendulum shift, as it were, to favor the hierarchical. And maybe the speaker is tired of giving him advantage. I want to bring it back to my favor. And these things going back and forth. That seems to be the one that we're observing right here. So this will summarize what we have been discussing. Okay. Now, NPU's form is the point of innovation. So this is driven by the hierarchical. I want to make a differentiation between the form used in NPUs from the ones used in modification use, so that here I would know what function this expression is playing. Okay. This might spread to verbal-based nominalization because these two are different kinds of nominalization, but they are nominalization anyway. So I want to use a single form. This also helps here because I'm innovating NPU's form, not yet on this modification side. So there are two forces that drive this change, which happens all over the world, actually. And then by spreading this one to the modification context, I'm using the same form into different functions at the expense of the hierarchy. Same thing happening here. So what I'd like to do now is to move from this diachronic perspective used in explaining, describing single language situation to synchronic cross-linguistic studies. I want to apply the concept that we have been learning to synchronic cross-linguistic studies. Okay. We see cross-linguistic variation or dialectal variations because the timing and the rate of change vary in realization. That would show that in some languages, the same form, same morphology has spread all over. Okay. But in some languages, maybe the extent to which this morphology has spread may be limited, more limited. Okay. And we would like to look at this thing in terms of gender and classifier marking. Okay, let's take a break for about 15 minutes, Professor Mohan? Yeah. About 15 minutes break? Yeah. Okay, so we'll be back at 20 after 11, right? Okay.
We'll have tea also.
Okay, great, thank you. It's a long talk.
I know, actually, I was thinking
You can fall out.
I came, you know what, yes, no phone even to call you. My phone is.
মানে এওঁলোকৰ লগত আহিছো বুলি ক'লে যে হেৰি
So now can you call the people outside? Yeah. So welcome back for the second session. So I request Professor Shivadhani for the second session. Yeah. Sir, please.
Okay, let's get back. We have a lot to cover. So we're now looking at cross-linguistic patterns, not only single language from historical perspective, but also we're looking at cross-linguistic patterns from diachronic perspective as well. Okay, and we are doing this study in terms of genders and classifiers that have been treated differently between themselves, but also from nominalizations. Okay. Actually, to this idea to the full extent to my mind, I'm exploring this even further. So, what do genders classifiers have? Anything to do with nominalization? Maybe this is the first question that comes in your mind. Let's compare Spanish and English a little bit. So the verb to kill somebody, to assassinate, killing somebody with political motives. Assassin is the verb root for Spanish. Okay. English, kill. If you want to nominalize this one, what do? You use that favorite suffix, killer. Okay. So this nominalizes the verb kill and derives a noun. So this is a case of lexical nominalization. Now, what they do in Spanish is to add suffix o or a. The asesino is a masculine killer, okay? The male killer, or asesina is a female killer. These are nouns. So what do we have here? Is non-classifying nominalizer. It nominalizes, but it does not classify what it denotes. It could be either female or male. Right? What about O and A? These are known as gender markers. This is O and A corresponding to These are classifying nominalizers. They nominalize assassin, give you nouns, but they are classifying in that asesino denotes male killer, asesina, feminine killer. So gender marking is a nominalization. Okay. So they have a very productive derivation using feminine suffixes. Many nouns are masculine, and you can derive feminine form like Japanese, Japonesa, professor, male professor, teacher, professora. And everybody agrees these are nominal derivation. So gender marking has nominalization function. Now, corresponding to this, we have grammatical nominalization, so-called participial form, similar to the participial construction that you have. So one sitting in the chair, okay, sentada en la silla, or either Spanish or silla, sorry. If you have an O, this O, okay, the same, presumably the same one, because it has the same function of marking masculine sitter, the person who is sitting in the chair. So you can show your family photo and say the one sitting in the chair is my dad. One sitting here is my mom. That's the second one, which is feminine. So this is denoting a person sitting in the chair. Okay. Because it is denoting thing, it can be classified either feminine or masculine. If these are verbal denoted expressions, you wouldn't expect there to be a gender marker. These are grammatical nominalization because they are not words, right? Unlike assassina, assassin. These are words now. These are phrasal structures. That's why we call them grammatical nominalization. And you probably memorize these things, assassina, assassina, but not these expressions because they are endless, right? You can produce any of these. So this is behaves very much like assassino. Sentado en la silla is like assassino. And the following one is same for feminine. So we have lexical nominalizations up here, grammatical nominalization. So this is a gender marking, okay? Now, classifier does the same thing. This is Hmong, Miao language in southern China. These are lexical nominalization by classifier. Sai means to supervise or to see, and use animate classifier to. It derives supervisor. This is verbal. Write to animate write. You get something like author, like writer, author. Okay. We have same thing here. Paper. Add classifier. Okay. Far, for example. Then you have book, and die. Then you have card or phone. So these are nominal-based nominalization. These are verbal-based nominalization. You use the same morphology for that. And they have grammatical nominalization, like this one here, okay, the white one. The white by itself, it means ua, thou, by itself means something like white. You can classify it further. Okay. And that's the animal that is white. Dai, that's a flat thing that is white. Okay. The white thing derive a new structure that denotes only animate white thing. White thing, dai, only flat white thing, like a sculpture. Here we have our favorite genitive constructions. Again, using classifier. Just like this, just like this. Okay. This is a nominalizer. So this must be nominalizer here too. Deriving mine out of my I. Okay. My flat thing, my animate thing, my flat thing. So classifiers have nominalizing function. Okay, and that's what you have in Indo-Aryan as well as Dravidian. Okay, on this kind of function of gender and classifier, Professor Pardesh will be speaking on Marathi this afternoon. Okay. So these are N-based lexical nominalization. These are N-based grammatical nominalization. Okay. So these are classifying nominalizers. Nominalizer and classifiers have nominalizing function. Okay. Now, by classifiers, we normally recognize two types. A total type. This type typically denotes things such as animate, inanimate, shape-based classification, flat, elongate, slender, this thing. And we have another type called measure words or mensural type that denote measuring units such as cup, a cup of water, 2 cups of water, 2 boxes of pencil, 1 box of pencil. They have the same functions. Okay? They're both mensural sort of types have nominalization. But we'll be looking at sort of that today. Okay, so these are examples from Thai. You can use for and classifier to denote animal, flat saying, and this is also flat saying them. Okay. So these are typical shape-based classifiers, shape as well as animacy to some extent. I mean, historically, animate. Tua now is used with inanimate forms as well. Southeast Asian language like Thai and maybe Chinese as well, and Vietnamese and so forth are known for Burmese having classifiers, but many Amazonian languages in Brazil, Peru, they also have classifiers. We are discovering more languages that have classifiers across the Pacific Ocean. So this language called Miranya has a classifier like one-dimensional medium-sized object, three-dimensional oblong kind of object. So by these examples, we are using term classifier for this form. Now, by grammatical gender, we're talking about systems that we find typically in Indo-European languages, including Indo-Aryan languages that we'll see. Now, here, if the head noun is masculine, modifiers have to change form, right? So masculine, you have to use the grossa, which is a masculine form, and ein for one. Masculine say Frau, feminine, Mädchen, neuter thing. Typically, I guess Germanic languages have three gender systems, and Romance languages have lost neuter category to a lot of extent. Somewhere you find here and there the use of neuter form. Maybe Indo-Aryan languages also vary along this dimension. Right? Some having three, some maybe have only two. So again, same thing here. Omen is head noun. Numeral is a head noun that determines the form of dependent elements. Now, there are several very serious problems with the current analysis of classifiers and genders. Okay? One of them, the very serious one, the two are treated as radically different phenomena. Okay? But they are both classification. So classifiers are generally treated as an element that operates, namely classifies the head noun. So if I have a G, the head noun is going to be elongate thing. Okay. If I have band, it's going to be flat thing like a book. On the other hand, in the case of gender, the head noun is a controller that determines the forms of modifiers. Okay. Here, in this case, classifiers are the pivotal thing that determines the nature of the head. Here, the head noun is a pivotal element that controls the forms of dependent. Okay. So they also show similarity, okay, despite these are treated separately, because it is not only in gender languages that we see this agreement phenomenon or concord. Okay? Some people call this phenomenon concord. So if I use the classifier ben in Chinese, I cannot use as the head noun pencil. Okay. If I have as a head noun, sure book, I have to use the ben. I cannot use G. So there is a dependency between classifier and head noun. as you have the dependency between man here, masculine, and feminine, not good, right? So both have concord. So they are similar in that regard. And in distribution, now numeral classifiers are often called numeral classifiers because they typically mark numerals. Numerals, as we will see, are the favorite target for classifiers. And so actually gender marking likes numeral. Okay. So not only numeral, but also demonstrative and genitive, okay, are marked by this one. So in this context, how many dogs do you want? I can just simply say C to R. That's a complete sentence. And this is behaving as the head of a noun phrase. So this is in NP use. And I'm referring to 4 animals out there. Okay, so it has a referring function. Or I can use this as a modifier with the head noun. Okay. And that applies to other constructions. So based on demonstratives, I can use either say, this one is big with a classifier, and I can use that as a modifier. Okay. Genitive the same way. But notice that in modification context, this optional classifier cannot be used. It's a very important observation, all right? Because we're coming back to this kind of pattern repeatedly. You see a classifier in its NP use, but not in modification use. This is going to be very, very important observation. Adjectives, okay. The little one. Okay. In English, you like the one. Modern English at least. Right? Okay. I can use this as a modifier. If I use it as a modifier, classifier is optional. But you have to use a classifier when you use it as an NP head. Okay. And verbal-based one, so-called relative clause. Okay. So can you bring me a new one? Here I can ask the one hanging in a closet and use a classifier optionally. Or it can be used as a modifier. So so-called classifiers actually mark not only numeral, but all kinds of constructions. And this is the case with grammatical gender. Okay? The grammatical gender more systematically applied across the board. We saw some cases of classifier use where optionality obtained. Right? But in the case of gender, especially Indo-European type gender, which is very mature, you right, applied across the board, right? So we have numeral, masculine, singular. Again, these are perfect full expression. Okay. How many cards you want? I want 1. Or uma, sorry, if I look at the feminine thing. These are referring, means I want 1 something, 1 masculine thing. If I say uma, I want 1 feminine thing. And you can use this as modifier, kaho and makaza. Same with demonstrate. SG is the masculine form, esta is the feminine. We have the same R marking here, then feminine marker. So you can use it as modifiers or as noun head, as in the case of I like this house. Or you're using I like this, or this is mine as an NP head, or as a modifier, as in this house. I like this house. Okay, genitives too. Male is a masculine version, meaning mine, my feminine thing. If I say mina, that's mina. If I say that, I'm talking about feminine object. These can be used as modifiers. So male, the same form, yeah. And adjective, blanco, blanca, white thing, because they have masculine, feminine contrast. By saying, oh, blanco, that's why I'm denoting and referring to masculine white objects. Okay? A blanca, I'm denoting something that falls in the feminine class. And they can be used as modifiers. Tajo blanco and Casablanca. Finally, we've seen this already, verbal-based one, masculine, feminine form, which can be used as modifiers. So the distribution-wise, classifiers and genders are very similar. They can apply to numeral all the way to verbal-based nominalization or participle, if you like to use that term. And in function as well. Okay, both classifier mark forms can be used as an NP head as well as modifier. Okay, 4 animate, 4 flat thing, and 4 flat something. And you can have masculine thing and masculine modifying something. Right? So they are very similar. So despite these similarities, the current analysis would divide these things in kind of 4-way distinction. First of all, they divide genders and classifiers, okay, on the one hand. And they divide these as lexical derivational phenomenon on the one hand, okay, these, and as an inflectional phenomenon in terms of agreement. Okay. They are treating these as if we have 2 separate phenomena. But morphology tells you that's not the case. We are using the exact same morphology, O versus R. Here, R versus, we don't have O here, but it may be blanca case clear. Yeah. As you have Tio and Tia, we have blanco, blanca. Same morphology. Telling you that this is the same phenomenon. But the current analysis would divide these things as derivation on the one hand and inflection on the other. That's not right, right? If you're writing dissertation for me and treat this kind of thing as two separate phenomena, I would immediately say, well, if they are 2 different phenomena, why do they have the same morphology? Go back, rewrite. You are glad you are not students of mine at Rice University. Okay, the same thing. These are treated in the case of classifiers as well. Okay, derivations, right? Undoubtedly, and some linguists like Doris Penn wondering, are we sure these are inflectional cases? You know, she's wondering. She's following traditional analysis and questioning. She should have gone 1 step further and say these are unified phenomena, not the 2 separate things. Okay? She hadn't gone that far, but she raised this question. We have same classifiers used in 2 different domains in a traditional analysis. So this is another problem of the analysis. Now, the methodological problem is also serious. People who have been working on gender and classifier have been looking at the phenomenon from this angle, okay, from the modification. And actually, again, I stress because many of you are engaged in the script work of the languages of India. Most grammars will give you an expression like 4 dogs. Okay? Many grammars don't give you, I want 4, this form. Many grammars will give you my book as an example. Most grammars don't give me, this is mine, or bring mine. I'll give you mine. Okay. So-called NPU's forms are not represented in your data gathering. Grave mistake. Grave because I'm saying These are the basic form. NPUs form the basic forms, and you are missing those. Look at your grammar, a description written by specialists from this country, from that country. I'm having a tough time finding these uses. So please collect these too, okay? Collect this book, but also this is mine. Bring me this, and so on and so forth. Okay. Please correct. Mine is this. Yours is this. I'll give you mine. Give me yours. Okay. Please correct these things. Not only my book and your book. Now, and these so-called NPUs forms are treated secondarily, as if they are derived from the basic modification constructions. Okay? And this is what Professor Greenberg, the late Professor Greenberg, told us. It is universally the case that we find what I call NPUs forms. Okay? And he's saying these derive by deleting the head noun, if the context allows you to do. Okay, this is what he's saying. He's looking at this phenomenon exactly from this angle and deriving these on the left as a result of head deletion. What do you think about that? You think that's correct? Again, don't believe what you read, even if the writer is as authoritative as Professor Greenberg. He can make a mistake. And don't believe in what I've been saying, okay? All right. So many people summarize the situation that we have been looking at in these terms, like Sasha Eichenwald description here. So gender, what does gender do? It categorizes the denotation of the head noun. Numero classifiers also classify the denotation of head noun. Possessive one, my book, my something, also categorizes the possessed noun, like book versus my dog, animate versus inanimate. Finally, this classifier dog, this classifier what did I say? Books, for example, the head nouns are classified. This is what she summarizes for genders and classifiers, what they do. But there are actually situations like what I have written here. NPUs forms are there, okay, but no modification form. If we have lots of cases like this kind of characterization is in trouble because we are not seeing head nouns. Head nouns are not permitted in some languages or some constructions, in some, actually many languages. And in your language. Okay. Prashant will give you one case in Marathi, but he's discovering every day new Marathi expressions where you have classifiers on NPUs, like one human came, but you cannot say one human boy. Now you will hear about that. So what are you going to do? You have a classifier. Where's the classifier? Here too, without a head noun. So obviously, classifiers in some languages, in some form, cannot modify. Okay? And you cannot derive NPUs forms from modification constructions, contrary to what Professor Greenberg suggested. Okay. So this summarizes the problem. If you look at these forms in terms of their usage, as I have been advocating as NPUs and modification use, you see this kind of pattern. You have a diverse pattern of distribution. No. Optionally use it, not a modification. Optional. Yes. All kind of combination. In the past, people have not capture this kind of diverse distribution of classifier and gender marking. Secondly, as we have been saying, they have been looking at this phenomena from this angle. Okay, modification use construction form is the starting point for OVR analysis. Okay? Then look at the headless expression, which they say derived from deleting the head noun. So their starting point is on this side. But if you have that kind of perspective, 2 and 4 patterns are problematic, right? You cannot account for, let's say, 4 because you have no modification construction permitted, but there is 1 without head noun. And this is also problematic. When there's no modification counterpart, I can use a classifier gender marking on particular item like numeral. So these cases, maybe even the 5th case is also problematic. Okay. Why is it obligatory here? And also the past study misses this very important point, namely NPU's forms are rich in classifier marking. They have 3 yeses, and there's only 1 yes on the modification part. So this is similar to what we observed in Amami Ryukyuan, actually. All right? You remember, forms in NPUs are richer, okay? And these are lesser. So they've been looking at this from opposite end, to my mind. You have to observe this thing based on NPU's form first, and then see whether they can be used as modifiers and not modifiers. And then you explain why we see this kind of pattern. Okay. And this is what we will be doing. So let's look at some example illustrating this. I'm sure you're very curious about that. Okay. Hi, Telugu speaker. Wow, yeah. Okay. So Telugu, if you say one masculine, say boy, man, okay, you use this do, masculine form, routine for feminine, and neuter. If the dog came, you say okati. Okay, so this is the what? Gender marking, right? This cannot modify, right?
Correct.
If you have noticed, you cannot say okadu abai in Telugu. Telugu is spoken a little north of this area, or maybe. Okay, we'll be looking at Kannada soon. So you cannot modify this. This is gender marking, okay, that can occur only in NPU's form. You cannot use them as modifier. And therefore, this cannot come from modification construction by deleting the head. The head is never allowed. So you have to analyze these on their own term. Cannot derive these things from anything else. Okay. You see similar pattern in other languages. Compare this with the human classifier expression, which can be used as modifier. Right? Is that right? This is okay. Yeah? And if you're a Kannada speaker, you can use gender mark form as modifier. Is that also correct?
Professor Sivatani, I just want to point out, C is there we just kept out.
Huh?
The C prime.
This one?
No, the C prime.
Sequel on the right.
On the right.
Yeah.
The word for dog is
The dog. Pukkalu will be dogs.
Yeah.
Pukkalu means dogs. You should remove the do.
We should remove the lu to make it singular.
So this has to be root.
No. The word ukkalu, we have to remove lu, so that's the plural sentence.
Lu is the plural marker in Telugu.
Which one are you talking about? Yeah? This one?
Yes.
Yes.
This,
The dog, the dog.
oh, this one?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So I have to be using single. So this is a plural form.
Yeah.
Ah, sorry. So I cannot use the one.
You
Okay.
do on your
Oh,
mind.
okay. All right. Any other correction? Yeah.
Tejas, please.
But we
Sir,
Celebrities.
Waka Kukka, Wakati Kukka, the singular, that's right. Kukkalu, that's the plural.
Yeah.
And Rendu Kukkalu.
Yeah.
The small human beings, we can use Wakati, Rendu. For
Uh-huh.
humans, Wakaru is the you are right, sir. That's right. Kukkalu dogs, you have to mention that Kukkalu dogs, plural word.
Plural form. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's okay. But not singular form, right? Yeah. The plural form is something like this one, isn't it? Yeah. And the plural form have gender marking?
Why is it?
Huh?
Is it gender mark?
No, right?
No, is it? Kukkadu vachai.
Uh-huh.
In a singular, kukka vachindi. That means
But
dog came.
do they have? Does it have in plural form?
Gender
Does it have gender?
masculine and-
That's what I'm asking.
Non-masculine doesn't be.
Take
But
it
talk
on.
about the gender of plural. They have plural mark.
number.
But then you don't have gender, sir.
Yeah.
No, right?
No.
No gender in plural.
There is no gender marking.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Dog related.
So here we're talking about gender marking, okay?
I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we see the Telugu data, so it's just my intuition that the reason that the gender mark one cannot occur with a noun is because it's not just gender marker, it also has this nominalizer marker in it. So instead of the head noun, the whole, I mean, the numeral takes it gets substituted with the nominalized marker along with the gender marker. Is it what?
Are you saying these are nominalizing marker?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just gender marker, it also has a nominalizer plus gender marker.
Yeah, that's what we are saying. That's
So
what-
I'm just clarifying. So is that the thing? Because that's why I think the noun cannot take the.
That's what we have been saying. So gender marking is classifying nominalizer. Okay? It nominalizes and then classify what it denotes. So without classifier, okka by itself, it means only one something. If you do, then we're talking about masculine, right? Routine, feminine, same. Okay. Okay. So demonstrative. So this is Canada. So avenue, that means he, I think, sort of conventional form. You can have. I think, can you still use avenue as a kind of demonstrative expression? That is my friend. Well, it's difficult for you. But point is that you cannot have avenue as a modifier. Okay? Whereas you have to use a. But if it's in NPU's form, when it is denoting itself, okay, you can use vanu. And the same here. You cannot use this as a modifier. You have to use the lengthened demonstrative form as a modifier. So we have gender mark forms that cannot modify, that cannot take a head noun. So these cannot come from modification construction. Right? So what we're saying is, as this lady is saying, vanu itself is a nominalizer that also classifies at the same time. Okay. Genitive is the same way. My father's, the masculine. I cannot use my father's servant. Yeah. Feminine. my father's feminine thing, I cannot use value as modifier. Again, so there are lots of cases where you cannot use gender marked constructions as modifier. It's funny because the person who's been working on gender, as some of you know, is Gregor Corbett, and he occasionally, I think often refers to Tamil, but he hasn't seen cases like this. And he's saying gender is defined by agreement. No, we can't have agreement here. We have gender system that is not controlled by agreement. Right? Why? Because we cannot have head nouns. We cannot have controllers with these constructions. Verbal-based one, again, so we're in the right country here. The tall one, adjective, is my son. Again, I cannot use as a modifier. Same here. Okay. Eventive, the one who came, I cannot use it as a relative clause. Right? The modifier form that. Outside the video, you also see very similar thing. Very quickly, because we are running out of time. Mine is good. You have a feminine, masculine marker in this language, Siddharma. But you don't use this as a modifier. They use different constructions. You cannot derive this thing from heavy construction because this is never used. Instead, they use something like this is to my this mother is to mine, rather. Okay. For verbal based on participle form, who, gender mark, but when it is modifying, it cannot be marked gender or gender. Now, classifiers behave similarly in many languages. Okay, we'll discuss the gender. We're talking about classifier now. So this is what Professor Pardeshi will be speaking later today. So you have one human came. Okay, that's fine, and you can even mark it with a gender. Yeah, but you cannot use these as modifiers. Okay. Again, these constructions cannot arise from agreement phenomenon with head, because they do not allow head. Yeah, this is a human classifier. Vietnamese, this one I like. This dog classifier is fine as an NPU, but I cannot use this as a modifier. And we'll be seeing a lot of classifier cases in Assamese and Bengali and some dialect of Assamese with Gitanjali's presentation this afternoon. Verbal-based nominalization. The small one died. Okay, the one that died yesterday. You can use classifiers, but not in the modification context. I cannot use or here. Either here. Another language shows similar restrictions. Some South American languages show similarity in this regard. So Murui has general classifier A and specific classifiers. Okay, and general classifier can modify, but specific classifier do not modify. Okay. So general classifier here is modifying the head. When there is no modification function involved, you use classifier. Okay. With the genitive, demonstrative is the same. You use general classifier for NPUs, but specific classifier for non-modification constructions. Specific classifiers cannot modify. In genitive, Lucio's machete, you don't use any marker. Okay. You cannot use a classifier in the modification context. But this is his, this is mine. You can use a classifier to denote specific items. Sicuani, language spoken in Venezuela, this is a masculine form, but this is not a gender system. This behaves like classifiers because there are other classifiers that behave alike. Okay, so if I am talking about I see one, meaning an animate thing, you use nu, but you cannot use kai nu form as a modifier. The same everywhere. Barasano, another Amazonian languages, they have nominalizer and then classifier. Okay? When they use verbal-based nominalization or participles as NP head, you can use classifiers. When you modify, you don't. You only have nominalizer, no classifiers permitted. The last example, the one I saw, you have to classify it is a masculine or something else. In a modification, you cannot have. Okay. So this suggests that what we should be really looking at is not from this angle that the traditional analysis studied, but from this angle. You have to look at the starting point is here, and everything else that we see is patterns, historical development. English used to have gender marking as in Germanic languages, and they lost gender. Therefore, they just say, I see one, I see two, without the gender marking. They might invent something, but when they invent a new marker, gender marker or classifier, they would start here, not here. Just like this case. First, optionally mark numeral with X. Okay? And then that expanded to this context. Case and context. And this is the way we saw, we looked at Amami, Ryukyuan earlier. So specifically, for example, no pattern may develop first marking in NPUs. The NPUs form is a starting point. Okay? And if you made this no as optional, you have the third pattern, optional. And if you use optional and turn it to yes, obligatory, then you have yes and no pattern, and so on. Okay. So there are different routes you can take to see this kind of development. So we are here again dynamicizing a synchronic distribution pattern. We see these variations because the languages change following these patterns. So the basic functions of classified gender marking. Okay. We must analyze the forms that do not modify, that cannot modify ahead now. First, that's a starting point. Because there are cases where you cannot start from the right-hand side because they don't have modification. So these have to be studied first. Okay. But then what's happening is, in the case of Marathi, this is Jan form, is confined still into the NPU's context. Okay? It has not expanded to the modification context. We saw a lot of cases that this expansion has taken place in Amami Ryukyuan. Right? But if you look at, there's no reason that this Jan in Marathi cannot modify. There's no logical reason. And sure enough, other languages allow you to do that. Okay. And we're claiming this modification form in Nepali is a later development. Okay, the initial part is here. Marathi might eventually do this thing. People often make errors, and may start using this kind of thing in the modification context. People often use NPU's marker and extend it to this thing. Foreign students in Japan often make error like that. They should be using marker like this one, but they generalize. So what we are seeing here is, in the case of Marathi, they are maintaining the hero as economy. Only NPU's form is flagged. I'm using this tone as an NP head. So pay attention to it. I'm using it as a referential expression, not as a modifier. I'm not using it to modify or restrict the denotation of head noun as in this construction. What happened to Nepali is that they have achieved the speaker's economy. Yeah, we're talking about the same thing. Okay, so I want to use the same form. This is the kind of explanation that we involved in explaining the development patterns in Amami. The same principle applied to explain cross-linguistic patterns. The same situation obtains with gender marking. We saw classifier situation. So in Telugu, ruti cannot be used in modification. But in Kannada, you can, right? So Obalu Hudagi is okay with the root. Is that right? Eh? Yes, it's okay, right?
Abba Udigi is there. Who is not?
So
Common.
we have a same.
Not very productive. Pallu Udigi.
So you can use. It is still optional here. Obba Hudagi is okay.
That Kannada speakers.
No.
Mistake.
Oh, no Kannada speaker.
Yeah,
It's strange.
optional.
So this is correct. Is it optional, sir? Oh, it is optional.
Not productive, no?
Where's my cursor? Is this optional, sir?
Do. Follow.
It is optional. How about here?
Follow. There it is semantic.
It's obligatory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a case of optional. Optional in this context, obligatory. So it's on its way. Okay, to become nominalizer. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, I think the same.
Telugu
type of
also the same.
Because the repetition in Telugu is not possible. The same principle works for Kannada. Because when you
Okay.
say nominalizer marker, that already indicates we are talking about the head noun is marked for feminine.
Okay. So the Kannada is trying to achieve the speaker economy. It's still optional. It's on its way. Oh, that's good. So this is what we would expect. You know, it doesn't happen. Obligatory, it doesn't happen. It usually goes through a stage where the marking is off. The important point is this one is obligatory in NPUs. You must have it first, okay? And that can develop, right? That's not the case with Telugu, as far as I understand. You cannot use this. So we have to analyze these first, okay? And simply the one on the right is a later developed. You don't want to start from this step as in the traditional analysis. That cannot be done for Telugu. It's problematic for Kannada because here in the modification context, Lu is still optional, but it's obligatory.
Sir, you can get obligatory in both cases if you take examples from Assamese text. In Assamese, both reality should be obligatory.
Lu is obligatory here.
Yeah. And use and modification use both are obligatory in Assamese language.
In what language?
Assamese.
Assamese?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We have a specialist here. We'll tell you about that. So it's more developed, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So that's the story. Okay. So we have here impossible, optional, obligatory. And that's the M. That's the way we have to be looking at, rather than starting from here. Okay, obligatory, optional, and no. Thank you. That's very nice. Yeah. So we have to be analyzing these. That cannot be done. Yeah. So classifiers obviously do not classify the reference of head noun, because there are many. We're talking about classifier or both systems that do not allow head noun. So we have to be analyzing this way. As John here is nominalizing numeral from quantity concept to a thing concept. Okay, thing that instantiates this quantity of 2. We're going to 2 here. So John is marking that don I'm using here in A has been nominalized. And it also denotes entities instantiating the quantity of 2 that fall in the human class. That's all. So this is not really a nominalizer. Okay. You are using John as an NP-use marker, indicating don here has been nominalized without the classifier. Okay. And John marks that this don is nominalized. Okay. And I'm using the same don here, not quantity don, but nominalized version. Now this is similar to the use of articles in some other languages such as Assamese. So John here, okay, is marking manuf is a masculine. Okay. And human class thing. And pon is referring to something. Hari is referring to something that is flat. This one, John is marking that the don here is classifying. Okay, it is classifying to human versus non-human. And when don is referring, denoting human, I have to use John overtly, only in NP-use situation. Gender marking the same way. Okay. I have to say Ruti is nominalized or is marking nominalized status of Okka in this construction. I'm using Okka not as quantity sense, in a quantity sense, but I'm using Okka as a nominalized entity. Okay, that's all and denoting feminine thing. Okay, so this is basically the same thing. And Corbett obviously has a problem with this kind of situation, right? Because there's no control of agreement. But this is really working on numeral. Yeah. I guess we have to. Okay, this just simply means in some constructions, or in some languages rather, these classifiers have become as nominalizer. Okay, when this item element occurs in all contexts in which this form is used, it is part of that construction. Okay. You cannot use ek in denoting things without them, okay, in either NP-use context as well as modification context. If that happens, this has become a nominalizer. It's part of the nominalization phenomenon. When these markers occur only in NP-use, they are not nominalizers yet. Okay. They are NP-use form. They are like articles. So there's an important distinction that we're drawing here. So the same things it obtained with a mature gender system as well. So numeral here, okay, denotes a single entity that instantiates the quantity of 1. and this denotation falls in M class. That's what this masculine form means. If you have feminine form, you are doing the same thing, except you are saying what I'm denoting falls in the feminine class. This is saying this thing, okay, denotes masculine class thing. Same thing with other genitive forms as well. Mine, masculine class. Mine, feminine class. White thing. Branco means not white. Branco means white thing. Okay, that falls in the masculine class. Branca, it does not mean white. It means white thing. Okay, white feminine thing. Okay, it's been nominal. Okay, verbal basis senses. And you need similar analysis for classifiers. So this all here is marking that the nya small here. We are not talking about property. We're talking about thing. Okay, that is small, and that falls in this domesticated animal class. Okay. So this is what this is doing. Just as in the case of ordinary metonymic expressions, these nominalized forms, the interpretation of these nominalized expressions depends on the context. Okay? So in the context of talking about dogs, classify for and classifier entire denotes animal thing, like dogs. The same C2 can be referring to inanimate things as well if we have different context in a different context. The same form, but the interpretation will differ depending on the context. Just as a glass a day may refer to different content. Okay. Same thing with the classifier. Gender. This is a class. Gender. O branco can mean any kind of masculine white entity. Okay. It is a context that determines what I'm talking about. So if the context is referring to a car, this obviously means white. But if we're talking about a hat, the same form, or branco, exactly the same form, may be referring to a hat. Okay. So these are all metonymic expressions whose denotations, whose references are determined by the context. Okay? You don't need any head to explain this. People posit heads for these constructions to explain what I just said. Okay? But actually context, provided context, you don't need it to explain this. Varies considerably from one construction to another. So in the case of numeral, they are obligatory. They are nominalizer. If you want to use a numeral in denoting things rather than quantity, you must use this. This is part of nominalization process. In this case, this is optional nominalizer. You may use it, you may not use it. But if you use, okay, you are denoting different things. Okay, you can use different classifier optionally, but if you use it, you are referring to things. So without tour here, this is big. This can refer to anything. But if you use tour, it has to be animals or shirts and chairs and so forth that have legs and arms. Classifiers are nominalizers or simply NP-use markers, depends on the context and construction. So these are construction-specific phenomena. Okay. You cannot sweepingly say entire classifiers are nominalized. They may not have become nominalizers yet. So in the case of genitive, for example, you can never use tour in the modification. So this is not nominalizer in this context. It's only NP-use marker. So let's go very quickly to look at the nominalizing function of type classifier. this construction, you have T as a nominalizer, and this can denote all kinds of things that you bought yesterday. This is a perfectly complete expression in that, and it may denote all kinds of things. And the context will determine what we're talking about. We're talking about a shirt, we're talking about notebook, but the one that I bought was expensive. What classifier does is to derive a new structure. Okay. So this is one case of non-classifying nominalization. So if I use tour, we're deriving a new structure starting with tour with a new denotation. And this is a case of derivation. New form with a new meaning here. If I use then new structure, new denotation. So this is a clear case of derivation. Similar to a pig can denote all kinds of things. Piglet denotes a subset of that. Everybody agrees this is a derivation. So if this is a derivation, now then these are also derivations. You're deriving new structure. Because the other one is a lexical derivation. This is grammatical derivation, deriving grammatical structure. So what kind of evidence supports our analysis? Okay, one is this one. Okay. Lexical nominalization and grammatical nominalization, they share. So we simply call this a lexical nominalization, and we call this grammatical nominalization. Our analysis would unify the two into one phenomenon. Where a traditional analysis would say, this is a derivation, this is inflection. They separate this into two different phenomena, not desirable. Same thing here. We're saying these are lexical nominalization, these are grammatical nominalization. You see this kind of interesting alternation. You can either use ordinary nominalizers or classifiers. They function in exactly the same way to nominalize. But if you use classifier, then you are classifying. Okay. So if you use ordinary nominalizer, show in Zazo, then you are denoting all kinds of things that died, that may have died yesterday, okay, including horses and goat. But if I use call, we are still nominalizing the one that died, but subclass of this. So this function is the same. They nominalize, but this one classifies further. You can use or this nominalize it and then classify the notation into this class. So ordinary nominalization is non-classifying nominalization, and these are classifying nominalization. They nominalize and then classify. Okay, they do two things. The same thing. Now, our analysis would account for this phenomenon fairly straightforwardly. Many nominalizers are derived from classifiers in many languages. Like in a word, Mha is an animate classifier. Gu with a long vowel is an inanimate classifier. And they have developed these as regular, ordinary nominalizer. Okay. But still classifying here, animate nominalizer. Okay. Inanimate nominalizer with short vowel. Yeah. Classify Gu, this is Gu. But these are still classifying them. Okay. And similar sort of thing is seen in other languages. You derive non-classifying nominalizer from classifying nominalizer. The interesting case here is Mandarin, Xiaozhou dialect in the south. In Mandarin, you have to use classifiers for numeral and demonstrative. For everything else, you use nominalizer. Okay. In Xiaozhou, they have developed this guy, which was originally classifying nominalizer, to this domain of non-classifying domain. Okay. These are non-classifying, but based on the classifier. So classifiers give rise to ordinary nominalizer. So there's an intimate connection between the two. And in fact, European nominalizations also have classifying function associated with it. So who versus which. Who is what? Animate, maybe human, inanimate, which you like, who you like. German wer denotes animate things, was inanimate things. So these European nominalizations are also classified to some extent. Okay. So summarizing what we have been discussing, we are seeing a typology of nominalization. First, it divides into non-classifying nominalization. These are ordinary nominalization that many people have studied. You can use pluralization as non-classifying because when you have plural form, they may have mixture of masculine and feminine, and therefore you do not classify. Group classify like group of 2, group of 4. Sometimes they have this kind of classifier. They would not be classified. In some languages, pluralization can be still animate, inanimate classifying construction. And what we've been calling classifiers are no more than classifying nominalizer. And the grammatical gender is the same. So what's the difference between grammatical gender and classifier? Okay. Grammatical gender focuses on these items, these ideas that are of central interest to us, such as animateness, human versus non-human, biological gender. These are very, very important concepts that we have to pay attention to, right, to survive, to get along with other people and other things. So they are very narrowly constrained type of classification because they address these concepts that are most relevant to us. They tend to grammaticalize faster. So gender marking construction, as you see in Indo-European languages, has developed fully. Okay. There's no optionality, whereas classifiers cover a wider range of items under its domain, including those of our interests. Okay. And that's why they are slow to grammaticalize. We grammaticalize something that is very important very quickly. So if rain is very important in your culture, you tend to find, distinguish types of rain into very fine groupings, as in Japanese. So what is relevant to you, you pay more attention grammatically. Okay. So classifier, the more general classificatory system, and that's why they lag behind. Now the development pattern that Gitanjali will be discussing this afternoon show this kind of hierarchy. You attack numeral first. Numeral is the favorite target for gender marking, as well as classifier marking. Okay. And it's spread to the right. But gender marking also might be at the beginning. Okay. So if you look at Telugu, Tamil, and Malayalam, they are developed in NPU's form because you use them obligatorily in most expressions here, but you cannot use them in a modification context. Kannada shows an advanced stage whereby what cannot be done in Telugu, they are allowed to do in Kannada. So this is the beginning of the development here. Everything else remains the same. Eventually, this might be developing new form. So you pointed out this should be optional in a modification context. What are the Kannada examples? Classifier marking is similar. as we'll see later by the presentation by Gitanjali here. So Bengali, similar, but if you compare this thing, well, it's optional depending on the locality. Hard Bengali, I mean, the data she collected in Assam, it's obligatory. Apparently, it's optional still in West Bengal. But it is obligatory in Assamese. What is optional has developed. Okay? Here, you cannot have classifier markup in demonstrative when you are modifying, but it's optional in Assamese. So Assamese has developed, but it follows this hierarchy. Okay. Here, not possible, but it's optional here, and everything remains the same. So Assamese has developed this usage that is not developed fully in Bengali. So why this hierarchy? This is one of the last question. So the development of classifier gender marking follows this hierarchy. So we might just entertain this question momentarily. So we have to think about what nominalization does to these things. So when you say nominalize numeral 2, you are saying evoke things. Okay? That is metonymic to the concept quantity of 2. This is what you said. I'm not using 2 as a quantity expression, but I'm using 2 as a nominal expression denoting thing, embodying the concept of 2. So I'm saying, okay, evoke these things. And this is what nominalizing numerals mean. If I nominalize 3, I will have 3 objects. Okay. So these objects that are evoked are most intimately connected to the concept of quantity. Actually, you learn the concept of quantity in terms of object instantiating that concept, right? So children's arithmetic textbook would have 1 with 1 apple, 2 with 2 apples, 3 with 3 apples. That's how they learn the concept of 1, 2, 3 quantity. Okay, 5 minus 2, you have 5 apples and then 3 apples. That's how. So numerals and those objects instantiating that concept so closely bound up together. And that's why numerals are the easiest to nominalize. This is my hypothesis at the moment. Modern Chinese writing, they are very iconic. So for 1, they use just 1 bar. For 2, 2 bar. 3 for 3 bar. So the things that represent the concept of quantity concepts are very, very closely bound, and therefore these are the easiest to evoke under nominalization. And that's why numerals are the favorite target for nominalization. You don't need a gender or classifier to nominalize, right? So how many cows do you see? I see 3. That's all. I'm saying 3. This 3 can refer to anything. But here I'm not referring to quantity 3. Right? I'm saying I see 3 objects. How many cows do you see? I see 3. I'm saying I'm seeing 3 cows. Grammar respond to this difference between whether you're referring to a concept of quantity concept, or not. So if you are referring to concept of quantity, you use singular verb form. So 2 is larger than 1. Is, yeah? 2 is larger than. How many cows do you see? I see 5. 2 are eating grass. Here you do not say 2 is eating grass, right? So 2 here obviously denoting 2 things, and then you use the plural. So even without a classifier or gender, you can nominalize still. This is zero nominalization case. Well, why do many languages like genders and classifiers? Now I know quantity of this stuff that you're talking about. What do classifiers and genders help? So that you know how to interact with them. So if I have classifier flat, if I have classifier round, so I'm dealing with two round things. So how am I going to handle? Okay, what kind of container I should bring to carry these things? And that's why classifiers are useful, especially with quantity. But inanimated is very important, right? So you try to stay away from feminine because they're very dangerous. It's too late for me. Okay, maybe just 5 minutes to go over this thing. Okay? So what we have been doing here is consistent with George Wall's analysis of modification. Okay, other philosophers, logicians also follow this his idea. So here he's saying white sheep. Okay, white sheep really means X and Y, where X is a white thing. Look, okay. And sheep is sheep. So white sheep actually means white thing modifying thing. This is what he's saying. White sheep does not mean property white modifying sheep. He's saying white thing is modifying. So thing is modifying thing. That is that. And that's good. So horn, white sheep. Horn is an adjectival form. But here, horn is not a qualifier. It's a denotation of horn thing. That's what he said. So white sheep modified by not quality of horn, but horn thing. And we have linguistic evidence for this if we follow our analysis of that, that we have been giving. So in languages like Portuguese and some of your languages as well, this means white sheep, ovelha branca. Branca here, we have been analyzing here as not as quality denoting thing, but thing denoting. We said gender marking is a derivation. It derives nominal. So this is a case where white thing is modifying sheep. And what does one white sheep mean? It means not quantity one directly modifying sheep, but one thing is specifying the subclass of white sheep. This is the analysis that Professor Wu advocated here. And many logicians analyze these things in the same way. So what modifies nominals are thing denoting structure. Okay. And this is a claim that the Professor Pardesh is making this afternoon as well. So numeral demonstrate genitive adjective do not directly modify. If they directly modify, we have to worry. It's worrisome. Why these things that belong to different parts of speech have this modification function? Our explanation will be easy because these get nominalized first before they modify. We're talking about one thing. We're talking about this thing. We're talking about the white thing. Okay? We're talking about the one who came. And that restricts the denotation of the head noun. That's what we mean by restrictive modification. Okay. So there's the unity here. They undergo nominalization first, and then they become the same status, right? Of the same status, namely things denoting structures. It is convenient to look at this agreement phenomenon that Kobe talks about. Colbert's analysis or study does not tell us the nature of agreement. He simply tells us, okay, we have a case of agreement, but he never explained why agreement obtains in different languages, even in classifier languages. Now, what Professor Ben tried to do is to explicate the notion of those descriptions, such as sheep, white thing, okay, represented by X and Y, are simultaneously applicable. That's what he said. What does this mean? Is there any way to visualize what Bull is saying? And he proposed to represent this situation in the following term. If we have X and Y, if this pattern obtains, we have a case where this range here, overlapping area, represents things that are X and things that are Y at the same time. And this is the notion of restrictive modification. Okay. So the head noun X may refer to all kinds of things, but the subset of it, which is both X and Y. And this is what we have in restrictive modification. This diagram is known as the Venn diagram after Professor Venn. So in the case of Obelia, we have the head noun there, and Branca, thing and thing. So white sheep denote this domain. Okay. This domain has white thing and white sheep that are white and that are also sheep. And that's what white sheep means. Positions represent this thing in terms of and. Okay, something is sheep and something that is feminine. Okay. Feminine white. Sorry, I have to be talking more about feminineness rather than same thing. Yeah. So basically, Bull's idea said that for modification, for restrictive modification, a modifying nominal must be able to specify a subset of the head noun. Okay, this is what restrictive nominalization says. If the modifier cannot specify the subset of the head noun, you do not have this intersecting pattern expressing this Gould idea of X and Y being simultaneously applicable. So what's wrong with Obelia and Branco masculine form? And this is not possible in Portuguese. Okay. Well, it's clear now, right? Because they will not allow us to form this intersecting pattern. Okay? So simultaneously feminine and masculine. It's contradictory. And this is the essence of agreement. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I have to run, you know. When I finish a long lecture, I normally run away so that they don't raise a difficult question to answer. Well, my flight is a little bit before, so we have some time to discuss if you like.
So if you have a quick question, please.
Burning question.
Any question, feedback?
Both Professors Pardesia and Bez know what I've been talking about, and you can ask a difficult question to them, okay, not to me. So maybe we should go to lunch because I have to come back at what, 2:30 or
No,
is it after 2?
I don't see any question.
Yeah, so though we don't have much time, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Shubhatini for making this possible, for coming all the way to Mysore and talking about one of the important topics. Basically, the humans are equipped with classification and categorization of things all the time. So we need some time to categorize the ideas you gave. and probably throw some questions to you over email.
Yeah, yeah.
And because it's, yeah, people can write just
Take up on the example and welcome. But I want to see how Indian language. You guys have to be writing this kind of.
yeah, we will be, I think some of us will be interacting with you.
Right? I think that's I can how long see it. Okay? So, pay attention to your language, don't believe in what they say. If we talk, don't believe in what they say.
So thank you very much on behalf of our institute. We are very happy to have you with us today. And now we will take you out for lunch.
I hope to return again.
Yes, I'll stay longer, not.
Before 18.
You know what, you left your suitcase next to me, I still feel I'm sitting on the plane. Next time not with suitcase inside this hall. Maybe you'll stay with us.
Project last 5 years.
We will hear from him this afternoon.
I'm learning from you about driving and language.
But of course, CIL has been collaborating with Prashant Pardeshi for a long time. So even before we joined, so quite for some time, they have been doing good work. We will hear from him more detailed
Yeah, in the afternoon.
in the afternoon.
Specific
Okay.
time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time and attention. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you. So thank you, Srinath. Very elaborate discussion on nominalization. Perhaps we somehow we are looking into very different ways to understand. To unify these ones,
Mhm.
the nominalization concept can work a little
Yes,
better
yes,
than
yes, yes. Thank you for the chance
Yeah,
to
yeah.
come.
Definitely we'll be doing on this line of research so that we can come out with a unification of the process. Yeah, and certainly we'll have some meetings with you on Zoom or Google Meet so that we can talk out what
Okay.
the features and other things, kind of a questionnaire so that we can produce
Mhm.
at least
All right.
100 languages
Yeah,
data
yeah.
on these nominalization.
yeah.
So that at least we come up with certain things like that. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, lunch is arranged, and I get to be joined for lunch. Thank you.